Tell me about our future president.
Oh, God. Just don't start me like that.
Oh.
All right.
He could be the future president.
He could be the future president. So we're talking about California Governor Gavin Newsom has just announced an inflation relief package in the form of stimulus. The total amount, or let's call it direct transfer payments from the state of California directly to citizens. The total amount is $17 billion. And here's
Drop in the bucket.
Here's the tiers, though, and this is where I think this will trigger some folks.
Yeah.
If you make less than $75K, or as a couple you make less than $150K, you get $350. If you make $125K, or your couple is making $250K, you get $250. If you're a couple making $500,000 or less, you get $200. And if you have a kid, you get $350. If you have two kids, you get another $350, and it caps out from there.
$500,000 and a couple tanks of gas.
Yeah, well,
buddy.
They're getting hurt at the pump. You know, you got to feed them.
Wait. So you get like $300 per kid?
I think it's so. First of all, the max cap is $1,050.
Yeah.
And I think that the calculation there is if you need the lower income tier, you get $350. And then if you have two kids, you get another $700 on top of that, $350 per kid, and you end up at a cap of $1,050.
I don't get it. Like, does every additional kid in your SUV like cut your gas mileage by like 90%?
Soccer practice, Steven. Come on, man.
People are gonna be like, Steven's so out of touch. Obviously, if you have three kids, you spend $700 a month on gas.
Gotta go drop the kids at pickleball.
But this isn't like a gas specific thing. It's total
It's
to
just
like
it's just a general like, hey, you're on tough times. Here's some cash. Is that like the pitch?
Yeah, I think so. But I'll give you my take right about it's not a pitch against inflation. It's a pitch against the governor has a vote coming up. He's running again for governor in 132 days, November 8th. And guess when those payments start to arrive? Just perfectly in October.
Oh, it's so weird.
Just weeks before the election happens.
We call a happy accident.
Right. And there's also this other thing going on where he may be trying to appeal to the further outskirts of the base because he's also concurrently running ads in Florida. And why would a California governor be purchasing ads in Florida if he didn't play the long game of potentially running in place of Biden as the Democratic nominee for president? So to me, I started thinking about this. I'm like, why would we introduce stimulus that caused inflation? We can argue about that for a bit, but that caused inflation with the problem that got us here in the first place. And to me, it's a very simple formula of like, the guy sees it as potentially buying votes. Like California has a surplus. I think a lot of that surplus has come from federal emergency relief payments, meaning the federal government pays the state of California because it's in a state of emergency, and that's where most of the surpluses come from. And he saw it in his recall vote, where he got put up for recall to get removed and replaced as governor, and he used an additional $600 stimulus to California citizens. And I think he saw that it kind of worked. Like it kind of got him out of that recall hole. And I think he sees it as an opportunity again. And the reason why I think it's somewhat disingenuous is because for the tiers we talked about, a couple making $500,000, like $200 isn't to serve the people hurt most by inflation. I think if you were going to do that, you would probably like, I don't know, whatever the poverty line is California, you'd probably like cap it at that and just say, let's focus this $17 billion.
Like $100K, man. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the poverty line in California is. It's obviously higher than the nation.
In California,
it is
fair.
Yeah, I mean, it could feel like that. But I think that's why it feels a little disingenuous. And there's several other things he could have done. So anyway, I feel like it was something important to bring up because it's touching on inflation, something that's really big, in the economy.
What's your main gripe here? Do you want to talk about how is this inflationary in a general sense? Is your main gripe oh my God, politicians are buying votes and this is going to be a dangerous slippery slope into what's happening?
What
do you want to hit first?
That's like the non-surprising part of it, that, oh my God, a politician is acting its own self-interest to get reelected. So I don't think that's and we could talk on that, but I don't think it's as surprising. But like but
I think we should cover it.
We should.
Just mention it, that it's just like a fraud. Like, and people fall for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I actually looked at, some of the comments on Twitter when he was announcing this. I'm like, I'm curious where things fall. Obviously, my algorithm's different than everyone else's.
Comments.
I was curious, like, what are people's reactions?
Isn't that where the alpha lives?
Oh God, not in politics.
I mean, we often make fun of politicians for like they think we're stupid, and they think that the optics is what is going to matter when all we really care about is the outcomes. But this is one of those examples where I'm like, we'll see. We'll see if people go for this, handout and understand if does this cause more inflation and use it as an easy ploy for buying votes? I don't know. But so I do want to touch on the topic of, does this cause more inflation?
Can we do the inflation part first?
Yeah, I want
Well,
to hear what
you and
guys
I were
thoughts.
going back and forth a little bit.
So the inflation
yeah.
part, I think, is interesting. Let's just start there because we did a whole episode on inflation. 2 episodes ago, and where I came out was like that. Fiscal and monetary policy doesn't impact inflation as much as I thought it did. Like the money printing, the dishing of money wasn't exactly what was like really driving inflation. This form of fiscal policy might drive it a little harder because I think like this will directly get spent, right? So it's like the velocity of money will like immediately go to velocity of money as well. But I still, you guys basically convinced me 2 episodes ago that like this doesn't really impact inflation as
Well,
much.
I think there's an important distinction though, right? Because like fiscal and monetary sound like the same thing. But I think when I say monetary, I mean like quantitative easing, that type of
Easing
thing.
or like bank reserves or something like that.
Yeah, whereas fiscal is like, hey, we saw your business might be in trouble. Would you like $40,000? No strings attached, 0 interest, and you're like, okay.
Because of its impact on the velocity of money directly.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
and it's arguable that in the pandemic, right, we had this massive temporary demand destruction, and we did do fiscal, we did helicopter people money, but also there's some nuance there. There was demand destruction, there was a hole we had to fill. And also, we, as far as I'm aware, we actually borrowed it from the Treasury, right? Versus like some of the MMT crowd to be like, you don't have to borrow it. You just send it into people's bank accounts. You don't issue any debt. It's the beauty of it. You just make that's like the true, like when people say helicopter money, right? They refer to the Milton Friedman old school where he was like, you literally print the money at the printing press. You don't borrow it. You literally.
I have the Milton Friedman quote on my screen.
That
As you
was the
say
thing.
that.
It's like
It's
literally
funny
just
enough.
print
Do it.
money, put it in duffel bags, and just dump it on people from helicopters.
Well, he specifically says that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. I think
Yes.
I've kind of like gone away from that because we see that like supply and demand of goods has clearly infected influenced inflation, right? So the fact that the supply chain broke down and then we dumped money in people's bank accounts, demand went up, supply went down. Obviously, we have price increases. So I guess I get away from the whole monetary phenomenon because we've put money in banks before. We've done tons of quantitative easing, and that hasn't had an inflation impact.
Well, it went into assets,
Right.
right? There's a reason why, that's why this is so hard for people because there's so much nuance here. Like there has been kind of some inflation, but it's like
It's
when you
debasement more than inflation.
Yeah, when you do QE, it tends to go into stock prices, real estate prices, and that causes this whole other issue because obviously housing prices, rent, all this stuff, this is a huge component of the CPI print, right? So it does affect people. But I actually don't think we have gone into some sort of paradigm yet where we've actually been shipping people money and doing it in an era where there isn't like this massive demand destruction. So this California thing to me is interesting because it's like, canary in the coal mine. Like this isn't COVID right now. Like, yeah, we're kind of in a recession, but like COVID was like, oh my God, like we're going to do a deflationary death spiral, Great Depression. Like everything is like sky is falling, right? This is different. This is like, times are a little tough and I need to win an election. So here's some money. And it's not even like, here's some money to you, the neediest of the people. It's like, here's $300 to poor people, and here's $200 to people making
He's
$500K
just
a
making
year.
sure everybody knows he's still here.
Yeah, and it's like, this is different. Like, this could be inflationary in a bad way if everybody starts kind of memeing this, everybody in power starts being like,
What if I
some
reframe
money.
this and I'll take the opposite of my own argument where let's say inflation is not the topic of the times and he says, California residents, we collected too much tax. I'm going to give you a tax rebate and I'm just going to hand you back some of the money that we kind of over collected. So here's some money back, and I'm going to do it based on tiers on income. And if inflation isn't a topic of the times, does inflation even get brought up in that scenario? I don't know if it does. And so when you reframe it, it doesn't sound as bad. I still think it make the argument for buying votes and being obviously politically advantageous, but it doesn't sound as bad. And I don't think any of us would be like, oh my God, we're going to cause a massive inflation spike. Obviously, the context we present ourselves in today influences how we think about it. And I still think it's not good. It's kind of working against what we're trying to accomplish.
Directionally, it's not good.
Yeah, directionally, it's like in the opposite direction we want to go.
Can I throw something out there? And I'm curious what you think about it, because I actually am sympathetic to the sort of high level purported goals of this policy. Obviously, the execution is kind of what matters in the end, and it's executed terribly. But I do kind of feel like we are going to get in a situation where we do have to like give people money, certain people money to buy very specific things. Like if I was ruling the world as a benevolent dictator, I would be trying to effectively like rectify some of this, like we went through this period where we basically bloated asset prices. People who bought assets got really rich. People didn't participate in that. And then, oh, by the way, you can't buy a house and also your gas is $7 a gallon right now. How do you fix that? You can't just snap your fingers and make gas $3 a gallon. You need to invest in supply, which we totally screwed up, and we can rectify that. But even if we do, it's still probably like 7 years down the road to fix supply issues. So what do we do in the meantime? Do we just let people sit around and not buy gas? And we're like, sorry, Jerome's just like, we need some pain. We're gonna. I don't think so. Like, I think you do actually have to send people money, specific people money. I'm kind of for that policy, and I actually don't think it would be that inflationary if done right. Like, I'm curious if you think you have a better prescription for this.
Well, I mean, if people bought gas, like you said, they're not going to buy more gas. They're just going to buy enough gas what they need to do their normal things. If they pay rent, that's not going to be inflationary. So if you could actually be smart about how you direct the money, you could obviously have the money put in ways that's not going to be inflationary. If they go buy a new big screen TV or a new iPhone or, buy Bitcoin, like, I mean, obviously there's things that could be inflationary, but, there are also other ways you could accomplish that without giving people money. You could bolster food banks, food stamp programs. You could do earned income tax credits.
How do you fix gas?
Yeah, I mean,
well, I think like it's really like putting a feather in the cap of like a digital CBDC with like a stable coin smart contract that says like you can literally spend it on these things.
Yeah, you could say you can spend it on diapers, gasoline.
You can see why they want it, right? Because like if we were the Fed and we had a CBDC, we'd be like, oh, this is easy mode. Here's fully free controlled money. It has to be spent here, and you can only spend up to X amount. Beyond that, you're probably doing something
and
weird.
Expires in 9 months.
Yeah, and like you can see why that would be good and why people would want to do that who are in power. And now I feel like we're kind of getting into that like kind of Russell Napier theory on how we're entering this like era of like very heavy financial controls, financial repression. There's going to be like this very concerted effort to simultaneously like print money to kind of even out this like wealth divide while trying to figure out how to confiscate money from the top and like fixing this kind of imbalance and letting people live their life, buy gas, buy food, not having society blow up, walking this tightrope somehow, which I'm skeptical is going to happen. I think this is like a good kind of longer term or mid-term bull case, I think, for Bitcoin, right? Because I think Bitcoin's time to shine is like the liquidity drain is over. We've kind of peaked in recession, and the governments are sitting around being like, oh God, we've got social unrest. Like gas prices are still going to be high. Like after... If this is the thing people have to understand, like all the Fed can do is destroy demand, but it's temporary. Like the second they take their foot off the gas or the brake, right? There's no additional, like it's kind of crazy, right? If you look at like the actual supply of oil, the production of oil, like Russian oil exports, it's the same.
Right.
It's the same that it was like a year ago, as far as I've seen. And it will continue to be the same, right? So once they're like, okay, we're done, prices just go back up, inflation goes back up, we're in the same spot because we don't have the supply. And it's like, what do we do? And it feels like what all the politicians are gonna do is they're gonna do the Gavin Newsom. They're gonna be like, all right, well, here's $500 just to pay for gas, and that's gonna be like, well, here's another $500, but it's just for your diapers. You're like, oh well, here's another $1,000, but it's just to subsidize your rent. And like, where does it end, and how do you protect yourself against that if you are sort of like a person who's kind of in the middle high tier of, and you've got these assets but not a ton, you don't have like, you're
Can
not
we
Elon
pivot?
Musk.
Can we pivot to the other argument, like the buying votes?
Yeah.
The buying votes argument. And I think
course.
what I'm asking is like, what's the nuance here? Because I like my take when they first issued stimmy checks to the populace, my thought was like, oh shit, like this is a slippery slope, and I thought like, I think right now we're kind of like shooting the messenger with Gavin here. Because the moment we issued stimmy checks, I immediately thought, oh my God, this is now the path to get elected. Who's going to give me more? And like, here comes somebody giving you some more than the next guy. And then like the next guy after that will be like, well, I can give you more. And the next guy after that, and it's like, it just continues down this path. And like, if you're a interested actor, you're gonna be like, well, yeah, who's gonna give me the most? Like, because most people don't give a shit. Like, who's gonna give me the most?
Nobody gives a
It's
shit.
gonna be like DAOs, right? Like, what do we do? Do we just do we reinvest or do we pay ourselves? Oh, 98 to 2. Oh, it looks like we just cash out. Like
Apparently, people like airdrops.